Okay, so good morning. So last week we spoke a little bit about Hanukkah because we were Erev Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and we spoke about how during Rabbi Moshe Wolfson and Rav Kook both talk about how during this period of Hanukkah, every single one of us, so to speak, becomes a Kohen, right? We're all, because collectively the Jewish people are called a Mamlechet Kohanim, a priestly nation. So with that as our backdrop, today I want to do something completely different than what we ordinarily do in the Modern Masters course. And instead of looking at Modern Masters of Jewish law, we're going to actually deal with some modern Shilos Tshuvos, okay, some modern response to literature related specifically to the questions surrounding kahuna, the status of who is a Kohen today, and what happens if a person is a Kohen today but wasn't always religious, and then he finds out the implications that he's now a Kohen, or that he's now religious, that kahuna status has an implication for his personal relationships, for his conduct, etc., etc. And we're going to start with this article that appeared in our Sheva almost 5 years ago, and we'll just read it quickly. A young man from Bnei Brak recently paid a visit to the religious council in Tel Aviv in order to verify the name of his grandfather, and to his shock, discovered that his father and grandfather had apparently both been Kohanim. Ordinarily, this would have been relevant but untroubling information. In this particular case, however, the young man was already married to a divorcee, and according to Jewish law, Kohanim are forbidden to marry divorcees. The discrepancy had apparently occurred because the father of the young man had originally recorded on his marriage certificate that he was a Yisrael, not a Kohen. But at some later stage, the entry had been crossed out and replaced with Kohen. So they took the form and not filled it out again, but put an X through it and wrote Kohen next to it. Okay. The young man and his wife then turned to the renowned expert in Jewish law, Rabbi Zilberstein, who told them to separate for the meantime until their status could be ascertained. The story then found its way to the ears of Rabbi Noam Amram, head of the Shalvim Beit Din, which deals primarily with marriage-related issues. Rabbi Amram immediately realized how important it was to find a way to permit the couple, who have 6 children, to remain married, and he researched the issue and formulated a solution. What Rabbi Amram discovered was that the young man's father, who had been completely secular, had not bothered to clarify his own lineage either for his own edification or for the purpose of informing his children that they might be Kohanim. He also investigated the question according to the halachic conclusions of 4 Rishonim, Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, Rambam, and the Ramban. Based on the above, Rabbi Amram ruled that in accordance with 3 of the 4 above mentioned Rishonim, that the government document did not constitute halachic evidence, and that it could not be used to prove that the man or his father or grandfather were definitively Kohanim. Rabbi Amram also noted that even in the opinion of the 4th posek, the document did not constitute evidence, as it had been written and then crossed out and rewritten. In addition, there was only 1 signature attesting the Kohen status, not the 2 eidim required by Jewish law. He also noted that there exists some doubt as to whether people generally considered to be Kohanim today really are Kohanim, as definitive records have often not been kept. Therefore, Rabbi Amram ruled that the young man could return to his family. Okay, so what I want to do today, there are numerous similar she'elot which she wrote that have been addressed to the Eretz Chemda Beit Din, okay, the Eretz Chemda Halacha Institute in Yerushalayim over the years, and they've been published in a volume of Shilos Tshuvos from Eretz Chemda, and literally people turn to Eretz Chemda from all over the world with these kinds of questions, and we're just going to learn a few of these She'elot and Tshuvot that have been posted to them from all over the world together this morning. So if you turn to page 1 on the packet, here's the first shiloh. It comes from Cali, Colombia, the first shiloh, okay? Kohen achai im goya, a Kohen who's living with a non-Jew, ve'eno shomer Torah mitzvah, and he's not religiously observant. Pigimato mina kahuna litzarach gira isha, is he allowed to give up his status as a Kohen in order that the woman could convert, v'nisuheim kedat Moshe Yisrael, and they could then therefore get married up halacha. Okay, in such a circumstance, is a person allowed to encourage the woman he's in a relationship with to convert in order that they could get married if he's willing to what? Give up his status as a Kohen. Is that allowed? So that's the Shaila. So now they're going to ask the Shaila in greater detail. Be'ir, in our city, Mitgora Yehudi Shem Muchzak Kohen, where there's a Jew who lives here who has the chazaka of being a Kohen, and he's married to this non-Jewish woman according to secular law. The person really would like his wife to what? To convert. Who eino shomer mitzvah kayam? He's not currently observant. Ukafi anireh gam avi lo hakpid al mitzvah. And from what we can ascertain, it seems what? That his father before him, who obviously would be the person he would inherit the Kohen status from, was also not particular about mitzvah. Sheilati, my question is, Hayim yesh derech livarer shemahu atzmo pasul kahuna? Is there a way to clarify whether maybe he's not really a Kohen? I mean, he himself is not right to be a Kohen. O shechasakato lekuna horata kidei latir lo libsav linasei lo likashit kaya. And to also maybe disqualify his status as a Kohen in order that what? He could, in the end, we could permit him to marry this woman after she converts. Kafisha Ra'iti B'tshuva Sha'ara Moshe Feinstein. Okay, he says, can we rely on a famous heter of Moshe Feinstein, which we're going to look at in greater detail in a few moments? Okay, and can we rely on that? O Shema Alai Lo Dialem She'ain Tikva, or am I required? The rabbi, the local rabbi on the ground is asking, or am I required to inform them that there's no hope? V'shelo uchal lo azor lehem, that I'm not able to help them. Ketzad alai lino, how shall I what? Conduct myself, he asks. Okay. So here's the answer. They gave a two-part answer. If you take a look. Al pi dinei HaTorah, according to the laws of Torah, Kohen nishar b'ma'amado kekohen afilu im avar averot chamurot. In terms of the status of whether you're considered a Kohen halachically or not, you maintain being a Kohen, even if what? You transgress and do many, many extreme transgressions. Im avia nidon hu a Kohen shenasa grusha gioret. If his father had been a Kohen who married a grusha, a divorcee, or a gioret, beno nolad mimena harei chalal, then he was not really a Kohen. He's what's called a chalal, meaning he's considered pasul from this kahuna. V'zed nifsal mikunato v'dino kazar l'chol davar, and therefore he would be what? Not considered a Kohen. If we could prove that his mother, okay, again, right now his entire status of being a Kohen is based on the fact that his father before him said he was a Kohen. But if his father also wasn't from, and we could prove that his father married a woman that was not permissible to him as a Kohen, then what? Then he's not halachically a Kohen, and therefore we could allow him to marry. To marry this convert. Aval kimuvan shelo yadu alanu. But since we don't know this, shachen kach hamitzia b'mikra b'anidon. Therefore, what? We have to accept the reality of the situation, which is right now, his reality is what? That he's a Kohen, and he's not allowed to marry this woman. Okay? So that's the first shot. Now we're gonna go across the Atlantic Ocean to Rome, Italy, to Rome. And the backdrop of this shayla is Kohen shenasa giyarat shitkaira lifnei gil legil shalosh. A Kohen who married a woman who must have been either adopted or soon after she was born was converted as a yalda, okay, as an infant. Okay, what's the status of their marriage? Mamdo, what's his status as a Kohen? Umamad abanim kekohanim, and the status of their children as Kohanim. That's the context of the question. Now here's the question itself. Sheila. The question is asked. Kohen nasa gioret Pachota mibat shalosh shanim v'yom echad. Okay, she was an infant. Okay, Kadam Moshe Yisrael. He married her though. What? As she grew up, and according to halacha. Okay, umaser ketuba b'fnei shnei eidim ksherim v'fnei rav musmach, and he gave her a ksuva in front of two eidim. Okay, and their wedding was officiated by an ordained rabbi. Okay, and I think in this case, the ordained rabbi means seemingly someone who had an orthodox, halachically or halachic ordination. Okay, number one. Aleph. Is it permissible to call him up as a Kohen? He's already married to this woman. Bet. Am I required to prevent him from going up to say Birkas Kohanim? Do we have to tell him he should not serve as a Kohen to what? For Pidyon Haben, for the mitzvah Pidyon Haben, okay? Just to that, Ma din abanim, and what's the status of their children? Ha'im heim chalalim midoraita or midorabanan? Are they considered chalalim from a doraita status or a rabbinic status? Umahin ha'ashlachot klape zchuyoteim v'chiyovim, and what's the what are they entitled to in terms of the zchuyot and obligations? Are they kohanim or are they not kohanim? What's their status? Okay, Ma din. Okay. What's the din of the nechadim? Liyadiat ameshevim. So just so the rabbanim who are going to answer this question should know. Hareni mosif kama ha'arot reka lemikra. There are more details. It's not such a simple case. So here are the more details. Okay. Hakohen hakirat habuchura b'toch hakila b'tnuat noar. He savar he met her what? The Kohen, the young man who's a Kohen, met this woman in the local Jewish youth groups, okay? And assumed that what? He knows her his whole life, since they're kids. He assumed she was Jewish because she was a full person, which she was halachically Jewish, but didn't think to ask that there might be an extenuating circumstance in terms of her halachic status. Gam ba'avar shakir b'churot achirot badak ma matzavam yudi. He was always particular what in the past that he only dated Jewish women. He was always careful. Okay, again, this is not here in Israel. This is in Italy. So, all right. The second point for clarification. When he met this bachura, this young woman, badak im hi yudia mileda v'anta lo shehi yudia mileda. He asked, have you always been Jewish? Have you been Jewish since your birth? And she answered that she has been Jewish since she was born. Because what? She was converted immediately after her birth, meaning she was either born to a non-Jewish woman or a woman who was not yet halachically Jewish, and then right after she gave birth, the baby converted, or maybe the two of them converted. We don't know all the full details yet. Or she was adopted and immediately taken by this family and immediately converted. She's always thought of herself as a Jew. So there's never any suffix in her head. And she spoke from the depths of her heart. She wasn't lying. Okay, as long as she's been alive, she's been a Jew. All right. 3. When the husband met the mother of his bride, he thought she's always been Jewish also. Again, he doesn't know her status. She always was involved in the community, and she even came to Shor. So I don't know, again, we don't know if the mother never converted, or if the mother also converted eventually, but this young man always saw that what? The mother was also part of the Kila. I didn't think that it would be that he has to question her status. Okay, 4. And after the man became aware of the status of his wife, he turned to many rabbis here in Italy to ask them, what is there any way to permit them to get married? According to halacha, Hayel Shalom Atzaf Rabbi Italia Panal Tzarfat. And since he wasn't able to find a single rabbi in Italy that would allow them to get married, he went to France. V'sham Rav Shigiorav Mikublim Sheseder Lo Chupav V'Kiddushin. And he found a rabbi in France who, even though he knew that she was converted, he accepted them and he did the chuppah and kiddushin. B'ktuva kemuvan habuchura mofia kegioret bat Avram Avinu. They even wrote the kesuva correctly and said what? That she's a gioret, the daughter of Avram Avinu. Okay?
I thought he was married to her already. Then he found out that she was converted.
He did. No, this is not. That's not the circumstance. This is they're giving you the whole circumstance, the backstory. Okay. Right, correct. He married her knowing this. HaKohen nikra la'achrona l'tar karishon. Okay, this Kohen has in the past always been called up to the Kohen Aliyah. V'naseh kappa b'kilato shakalato, and he continues to duchen in the community where his wife grew up. V'gam be'echad mibate knesset b'Roma, and also in one of the other shuls in Rome. Lafishit chatera bachor hayarak misorati. Before they got married, this bachor was traditional. Yesh etzayin she'acharei nisuin hazug makpid b'shmirat mitzvot. And now we have to say what? That since they got married, this couple became in their own house more careful to keep mitzvah. Okay. So what do? On one hand, it's a real halachic problem. On the other hand, you could blow up a family, and a family that seems to be growing in Yiddishkeit. So what's the answer? Okay, so here we go. Now it begins by saying what? Here's the beginning of the tshuva. Asur l'kahin lisa gioret af imit galira pachota mibat shalosh shanim. It's prohibited for a kohen to be married to a non-Jew, to a gioret, to a convert, even if she converted when she was an infant. Vim avar naaseh alav l'gershan. If he did marry her, then what do you have to tell them to do? They need to what? Get divorced. With all the challenges, but the tshuva continues. That's the introduction. But, however, first you have to clarify if the halachic status of the family of the husband as Kohanim is really crystal clear. Okay? Is it certain that they're a family of Kohanim? Im amnan kachu hadavar, kegon shemesor hakuna shalhem libosses al Yudim shomrei Torah mitzvot, harei shu tzarach legorsha. If it's true that they can establish that without a doubt that the family are Kohanim and that status is confirmed by people that are shomer Torah mitzvos, okay, that can give edus, that are kosher to give edus, then what? Then he has to get divorced. Okay? Aval. But, the Dayanim answer, im eina davar barur. If it's not really crystal clear, va'afilo davar b'safek, and even if it's a question mark, okay, even if it's some question mark, ein hu chayav l'garesh. He's not required to divorce her. And if they stay married, he has to what? Cease behaving like a Kohen. And from this point forward, he becomes a Yisrael in every way, shape, and form. And if that's the case, if he does that, then what? I don't think it affects the status of the children. If they can clarify that what? That he was not really halachically a Kohen, then they can stay married, and that doesn't have any impact on the status of the children. Meaning they would also be Israeli. But if his status as a Kohen is certain, Hare kol od she'ena megarish at ishto. As long as he doesn't divorce his wife, ein lahatir lo lisat kapav. You can't allow him to continue to duchen, to do birchas kohanim. Amam b'derech chochma v'noam. But you have to communicate to them sensitively and sweetly. Ve'ein l'kayam bo din ukdushato. Okay, he has no status of what? Of kedusha as a kohen. Create ein lechado kikohen ba'aliyah rishana l'TORAH or b'shar dvarim shinhog lechaved b'hem kohanim. You don't give him any special status as a kohen. Elo harehu kashar achiv ha'Yisraelim. But rather you consider him like what? All other Yisraelim. Now comes the challenging part. And therefore, for the same reason, what? You should prevent him, if he remains married to this Gyaris, from what? Serving as a Kohen for the mitzvah Pidyon Haben. Okay? You should find another Kohen that is not calling his status as a Kohen into problematic territory. And despite this, in kfar podeh, if he's already served as a Kohen for Pidyon Haben, ha-pidyon mo'il. The Pidyon is still kosher. Meaning you don't have to tell the kid that it was the family that because the Kohen wasn't really what was a problematic Kohen, that now you have to go back and redeem the kid again. No, it's okay. Shekenu Kohenu. Because what? He is a Kohen. Okay? He's only puzzled to function as a Kohen now because why? Because his status of being a Kohen has been clarified and he's married to a woman that is certain to be married to, and until he divorces her, he cannot function ritualistically as a Kohen, but his status is what? That of a Kohen. Okay, now he says, Lefi Rabba Mishulchan Aruch Hagioris Asura Mishum Zona Aktuva b'Torah Ubechlal Zeh Giorat Shnitgaira Lifnei Shegia L'Gil Shalosh. He says, according to the Torah, a Gioris is not permissible to be married to a Kohen. Okay, even if she did so as an infant, and she therefore is not permissible. L'chein yesh litaches el abanim kechalalim shiatzu legamre michlal kuna. Therefore, all their children have to be considered chalalim, which means they're disqualified. Okay, they do not fall into the category of kahuna at all. Le'inyan aliyah leduchan, whether it be to go up to do birkas kohanim, aliyat kohen to be called to the Torah as a kohen, or bepidyon abechorot, or to redeem the firstborn son. But now comes the more difficult part. Af habanot, even the daughters, bi'aton chalalot, asurat ein lekohanim. Since the daughters are also chalalot, okay, they're not allowed to marry Kohanim, meaning ubezed din al chamor midin Yisraelit, okay, and therefore their status is more limited than even a regular Israelite, because they are the result of a prohibited relationship. They are not allowed to marry Kohanim. Okay. Lagaba nechdim. And what about the grandchildren? Tzetzei abanim mamshichim lechshev chalalim ba'ofen and iskei leah. The children of the sons, okay, they are still considered, the next generation, they're still considered chalalim, meaning that they still are not regular Israelites and they're not Kohanim, okay? Because even if they marry a kosher Jew that's permissible to them, it doesn't change their status in terms of rectifying their status of having come into the world through an unpermissible relationship. But what about the children of the grandchildren through the daughters? If again the daughters follow the rules and married regular Yisraelim and not Kohanim, then their children are considered full-fledged Yisraelim. They're not chalalim. Shechem b'nei Yisrael mikveh Torah l'chalalos. Because why? Because the status of whether you're a Kohen or a Levi or a Yisraelite, that comes through the fathers, not through the mothers. Okay? So the daughters cannot marry Kohanim. The grandchildren to the sons remain chalalim because the fathers were chalalim. The grandchildren to the daughters are Yisraelim because the father was yeah.
Rabbi, who does the Rambam, the way
Yeah.
of the Rambam, and, I thought I heard that if someone was adopted before a certain and becomes a year before a certain age, it's considered a full-fledged Jew.
It is considered full-fledged Jew, but not for marriage of kahuna. That's what he's saying. That's in the kahuna. That's why they asked that question. Even as an infant, okay. Okay, so it's part of the challenge, the challenging status of the kahuna. Okay, now
What happens here in Israel? We don't have that problem.
we do. We just saw a story. We just saw a story. This case is right here in Israel.
What happens in the United States where you have so
We're going to get to the United States in a minute. There's a tshuva from the United States in a minute. Okay, so first, before we get to the United States, we're going to see another short one from Zurich, Switzerland. Okay.
Even after age,
What?
someone who's adopted even after age 3 and and they convert, they're also considered
Correct, but that meaning if you're ger katan, which is a whole different sugya, which we're not going to get into, which is the sugya that Rabbi Bradowitz has been talking about. There are various heterim in terms of what's expected of a child that's being adopted versus someone who's closer to gil mitzvos that are being adopted. In terms of a child is at the mercy of their parents, meaning their child can't all of a sudden start keeping chal v'yisrael if his parents don't keep chal v'yisrael in the house. Okay, so the expectations in halacha are much more lenient towards, according to many poskim, maybe not all, in terms of a family that wants to adopt a child versus someone who becomes a convert later, closer to the age of Gil Mitzvah or after Gil Mitzvah. Okay, so let's just go back to this one comes from Zurich, Switzerland. Nisuya Kohen leisha shenivla legoy. A Kohen who was married to a woman, okay, who before that had been intimate with a non-Jew. We have sitting amongst us in our community a young woman who became a balat tshuva. But at one point she was married to a non-Jew. And they got divorced according to secular law. And she has a child from that first marriage. Okay? Sheilatihi, my question is, is there any way to permit her to get engaged to marry a Kohen? And so says the Dayanim, Liisha shnivla legoy ein kol heter linaseh lekohen ve'ein chulek kach. Okay. We don't know, by the way, the status here, whether she's already in a relationship with someone who's a Kohen, or whether now that she's become a Baal Tshuva, the local community is trying to set her up with someone. We don't know the backstory. It doesn't go into that much detail, but the Dayanim answer very plainly here that there's no tzad to permit it. Now we're going to get to a longer, more evolved case that comes from the United States, comes from New York. Okay, Din Kohen she'ishto nivla legoy b'tzirota. What is the status of a Kohen whose wife had been in an intimate relationship with a non-Jew in her youth? V'asher chazkat ha'kunata klusha, and also in terms of his status of a Kohen is already questionable and weak. Umibaseset al divrei aviv hamevazet hayadus, as based on the fact the only one who told him and can attest to him that he is a Kohen was his father, who himself wasn't from, but was mevazet hayadus, rejected Judaism. Okay, wasn't committed at all. So here's the shaila. Okay. Okay, in my community, there's a couple that came before me. Okay, this is the rabbi of that community returning to the Dayanim in Eretz Chemda for Hadracha. B'nei Yasrim Rishmana, they're 28 years old. Shechazru b'tshuva lifnei shana v'chetzi, that did tshuva about a year and a half ago. They started doing tshuva. Acharei she'itchatno, after they had already been married. Ha'ish hazeh omer shehu kohen. This young man told me he's a kohen. Hu amar li she'ishto, he told me that his wife, keshaita bat shmona esrei, he told me that when his wife was 18 years old, hitchatna in goy l'tkufat ksara. She was married to a non-Jew for a short period of time, be'erach chutshayim, for just 2 months. Hu yada mizeh lifnei shem hitchatno. He knew this before he married her. Ela shelo yada she'asa l'kohen l'isa isha kazot. But again, he wasn't knowledgeable and didn't know there was not permissible for him as a Kohen to marry a woman in of that circumstance. L'she'elati, eichu yodea shu Kohen. My question is, how does he know that he's a Kohen? Okay, when I asked him how he knows he's a Kohen, hu eshiv she'aviv amar lokach. He said his father answered him that he was one. But this is no real legitimate proof. Why? Mishum adam acher. There's no proof from any other person. Because all the other close relatives are either died or they're not connected to them at all. There's no extended family to confirm the kahuna status. The father is not from. He even eats on Yom Kippur, God forbid. Okay? And that man who used to eat on Yom Kippur, what? He passed away before this man came to live in this young man came to live in our community. Okay, so the grandfather, right before he was born, the grandfather of the father of this man, okay, passed away, and on his matzeva it says Kohen. Abba shal ish shagar b'kilati omer shu yideshu Kohen ki kach amar lo aviv. This man's father, when I asked him how does he know he's a Kohen, he says, because my father told me he's a Kohen. Aviv shal Abba and hipolel b'shabbatov b'berekased. The grandfather of this young man came to shul on Shabbos. Aval gam hu lo ayadati ochel achal nevel to trefut. He didn't even keep kosher. Okay, so he might have come to shul povasham. Okay, but he didn't keep kosher. He wasn't from. He said, when I spoke to the father, he said, what? I never heard, when I asked him, did you ever go to Duchen as a Kohen? He didn't even know what that was. Okay? The man who's living in my community says that even though he wasn't religious, he always felt that he has an obligation towards Judaism because he knew that he was a Kohen and that made him a leader, so to speak, on some level. That now he's coming to me and saying, what do I do? What's my status? This couple has two young daughters, meaning they became from a year and a half ago, but they've obviously been married for a number of years. They have two young daughters. Obviously, as they become now more knowledgeable from, they're very, very concerned about the circumstances they find themselves in. Obviously, it's a very, very pressing and trying, extenuating circumstance and situation. In order to save the life of this family. Okay? Is it permissible to rely on the famous heter that Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote? Sham katuv Rav Moshe Feinstein zatzal shema ish lo shama min shomer Torah ein lismoch al chazkat kahuna shelo. That the person doesn't have anyone who's from who can attest to what his status as a Kohen, okay, that can give a proper acceptable edut to his status as a Kohen. Then what in such circumstances we can say he's not really halachically a Kohen. That's the famous psak of Rav Moshe, which, by the way, you can see in the footnotes on the side. You can see where that comes from. But okay, so right back. So let's go back to the tshuva. Od nikuda chashuva achad. There's one more important point I need to share with the dayanim. Ani makir et hazug rak kechodesh. I just met this couple a month ago. Hem rak achshav matchilim lilmod Harbe Dvarim Chashuvim B'Inyanei Shmiras HaMitzvos. They're just beginning their journey, okay, to learn more and more about keeping mitzvos. Any Yodei Im Lo Yashuvu L'Suram Hara Im Agilam Shechayavim Litgaresh. I have no idea if it's going to have a negative impact on their commitment and the trajectory in terms of their commitment to Jewish life if I tell them what? That they have to get divorced. Higanu Lezeh, כי האישה שנבלה לגוי גלתה את זה לאישה אחר בקהילה, והאישה השנייה אמרה לה שהיא מוכרחה לדבר עם הרב. We only came to be aware of this because what? In schmoozing with another woman in the community, she told the woman, the wife in this case, told another one in the community her life story. And when this detail became revealed, that woman, very kindly said, it's important that you go speak to the rabbi about this circumstance. And that therefore at this time I'm turning to you, the Dayanim of Eretz Chemda, for guidance in this difficult circumstance. Shehu Eino Kohen Mutar Lo Lishaer Mishto. Is it permissible for me to rely on the heter of Moshe Feinstein, okay, and tell him he's not really a Kohen, and therefore it's permissible for him to stay with his wife? In Kain Ha'im Gam Mutar Lo Litamei Lamet Kamo Kol Yisrael. If that's true, is he really become a Yisrael in every way, sense of the form? That he can go to funerals, he doesn't have to, he's no longer a Kohen in any way, shape, or form. What's his status? Okay? So here's the answer. Okay, but Shuva l'she'atech miyom kavva b'shvat, okay, tafshin beis, l'achar shekibanu b'harotcha be'emsot ha'telefon ki, and after we have the clarification on the telephone that from you, that Aviv Shal Shoel Shumakar Yedia Odel Takahuna, that it's only the father of the person asking the shaila who can attest to the fact that he is a Kohen, that their family are Kohanim. Lo ba levedek. That a father didn't come to shul. Einenu oleh l'Torah Kohen. Never was called to the Torah as a Kohen. Ma'olam lo nasa kapav. He never went to duchen. V'hu mugdar al yadecha ka'adam hamevazeh et hayad. So he always conducted himself as someone who completely rejects yadis. Gam avi aviv shal shol lo nasa kapav kukohen ukanir gam lo ala Torah kukohen. Even his grandfather, okay, never went up to the Torah as a Kohen, never duchened, okay. Haktiva matziva hi al pi harot avi Shoel. The fact what's written on the matzeva of the grandfather is what? It's based on the instructions of the father of this young man. Haresh al pi ha'matorah b'shelatech. Samach habahiras shenitnu telefonit. Okay, based on everything that was outlined in your question, and based on the clarifications that we shared above, that you communicated when we spoke, Nira she'efshar lidmuto lipsakav shalgon Rab Moshe Feinstein Bigros Moshe Eben Ezer. Okay, and it says it appears to us that what you absolutely in this case can rely on the leniency of Rab Moshe Feinstein, the famous psak of Rab Moshe Feinstein, brought in the Igros Moshe, and allow this couple to continue to be together, that he does not really have a full-fledged chazaka as being a Kohen, and therefore we do not have to blow up this family, and rather we can encourage the family to continue to grow and continue to seek holiness. Now, just to bring this all together, we began, first of all, a very interesting child's Jewish, where we began by saying that one of the reasons why we're talking about Kahuna this week is because last week we talked about Hanukkah and how during Hanukkah we all become Kohanim. So one of the interesting things here is that in the last tshuva, what was one of the determining factors in terms of why they can rely on the kula, the heter of Moshe Feinstein? Because this family is re-engaging collectively to become Baalei Tshuva. They're going up in sanctity, Ma'alin B'Kodesh, as we know, which is really what Hanukkah is truly all about. So I thought this was just an interesting set of tshuvas and something different, a little bit different to do this morning. We'll be back with Masters of Jewish Thought next week, but I just thought, I saw this in my files. Obviously I've given this year in the past, but I saw this week. I thought this might be something, a little bit of a different twist to do, and I see from the faces that people enjoyed it, and it was a pleasure learning together this morning. Shabbos.